Hey, y'all, welcome in on Texas Football Tuesday night live stream, live from Austin, Texas. For myself, Rod Babers, CJ Vogel, also in rainy, not even 90-degree Austin, Texas. Not sure what's going on here in late July, but here we are as we count down the days to the college football season. SEC Media Days in the rear view. We got ACC Media Days, Big Ten Media Days happening right now. And, of course, the Longhorns will go to camp coming up on July the 31st. So we're about 9 days out to that. Steve Sarkisian and the coaching staff down at Coaches School in San Antonio. So we'll jump into those conversations, the latest on recruiting before the Longhorns hit the practice field and get it going on what should be a very exciting, very fun, and optimistic 2024 college football season. We appreciate all the welcomes. Let's go. Let's get it going here. It's Aaron Hogan, Rod Babers, CJ Vogel. Guys, how we doing?
Good. Doing great, man. Doing great. I like the countdown is starting to get to some more reasonable numbers.
Digits.
Yeah,
single digits.
It's starting to get close to some reasonable numbers. And yeah, we're single digits away from training camp starting, so that's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
The field. I mean, that's
Aaron, you mentioned we're not even at 100 degrees yet, right? I mean, this feels good. These boys aren't going to be seeing 105, hopefully, whenever fall camp kicks up. But hey, I'm enjoying it for now. That's for sure.
Yeah, man. I mean, wherever you're listening or viewing, I should say, across the state, across the country, across the world, we're here in Austin, and it's been rainy and it won't hit 90 all week. So it's like, I don't know where we live, but we'll take it. We'll take it. Feels pretty darn good. I know it's a little moist and wet and all that, but we're in for late July in Austin, Texas, getting ready for a college football season. We'll get into big conversations here this evening, and we appreciate all your super chats, all the conversations Matthew produces tonight. Hey, guys, CJ, let's start with the Coaches School. I mean, I know for our audience, maybe not the biggest deal, but for Steve Sarkisian, his staff, what it means to the state of Texas to have over 10,000 high school coaches and coaches from across the country or across the state descending on San Antonio. It's a big opportunity for, this staff to continue to make inroads with these high school coaches and build their brand and just, build relationships with the important people in the state.
Yeah, no, I was able to make it down Sunday afternoon. That was my first time going to the Texas High School Coaches Association, the little coaching school that they call it down there. Listen, it's nothing little about it, right? You mentioned 10,000 high school coaches. It's not just football, it's basketball, it's baseball, it's volleyball, it's everything, right? They're selling all sorts of stuff down there. They got great coaches conventions for college coaches to come in from Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, SMU, wherever, Incarnate Word. You mentioned it. Texas is there as well. So I was really amazed by just how many people flood the streets down there in San Antonio for this event. And, of course, I got to hear Steve Sarkisian speak. And 8 days away from the start of fall camp, his mind is certainly on football as ours switches over from recruiting, which will certainly take the forefront, especially in 2 days when Texas hosts a number of elite prospects on campus this week. But hey, he was talking about it. Recruiting, June, July, it's great. It's nice to build some of the class, but when it comes down to it, there's no panic with this staff in June or July. Wait until December, and we'll talk about it again. That was one of the big quotes that Sarkisian had after the coaching school. So just being able to sit there and talk with, Reginald Samples or Coach Mathis from DeSoto, all these guys who are, so heavily acclaimed in the state of Texas, all under one roof with all of the big time, college coaches as well. It was really impressive. So plenty to talk about as well. Sarkisian, one other thing I wanted to mention, he says, each recruiting class takes its own pace, right? Mm-hmm. You don't see it all too often where by a certain spot every year, Texas has the same commits. And though normally you do see Texas go on a bit of a run in late June following the official visits, early July, Sarkisian said, yeah, you know what? There's so much evolution in the world of recruiting right now, with that first signing day being pushed up to the first week of December. Now you have that whole back end of the month to focus on the transfer portal. He's like, everything is on its own pace right now. So we had a blueprint coming into the year. Right now it's all about kind of reacting to and trying to stay ahead of the curve in terms of the recruiting calendar. And right now I think you're seeing it done very well with the Texas staff.
Yeah, Rod, very well. Our audience should know if they don't that when the Longhorns won the national championship in early January of 2006, the first group that Mac Brown thanked were the Texas high school coaches from the podium as he was getting the trophy. That was the first thank you, because most of that roster was built up of Texas high school talent and understanding how important that base is. And there have been some Texas coaches who build great relationships and staffs with that group. Mac was maybe the best we've seen. Darrell Royal, of course, but Steve Sarkisian seems to understand that there's, he has instructed his staff to be there, be available, do clinics, talk to the coaches, because that's your talent resource, bringing folks in, and just be good stewards of the game in the flagship university in the state of Texas.
Yes, no doubt. I mean, there's no state that puts more resources, that puts more kind of manpower into the industry of high school football than the state of Texas. And that's why we have such high level high school football. And Sark, he actually has kind of talked about, these really prestigious programs that have been able to establish themselves as, winning programs in the state, championship caliber programs year after year in the state of Texas. We know all of them. I'm not going to start naming them. Y'all know y'all are. And Sark, and I've heard CJ mention this too, but Sark talks about how he likes to recruit players from these really good high level high school football programs. And he talks about how essentially they have vetted the football character a lot of the times, through those programs, right? Because they have such a good culture there. You're not going to be competing in the state of Texas at the highest level year after year and competing for championships, 6A, 5A level, unless you got a really good culture there. And he talks about how that's why he likes guys who've been to state championships, won state championship, played for championship caliber teams in high school, because he wants those guys who their character has essentially been somewhat vetted. They've already been that football character has been cultivated somewhat by that great program, because we know these programs. I mean, they'll weed out the bad football character, whether it be the players because they're kind of a player led teams, or whether it be by the program itself, or they'll be able to reform bad football character. Guy had bad work ethic, bad teammate when he came in as a freshman, but watching all these really high level football players who have great leadership skills, how he learns how to become a leader and learn how to be a good teammate, learn good work ethic. So Sark talks about the level of high school, and by the way, that's not the case in Florida. By the way, Jerry Hamilton will tell you, like Florida, they don't invest in the infrastructure, if you will, of their high school football the way Texas does. So it's not really the same in recruiting those type of athletes. These guys don't hit the weight room and have a strength and conditioning program like high school football programs have in the state of Texas. So it's just every state has a little bit of a different culture, but there's nothing like Texas. And Sark is taking advantage of that, and taking advantage of the fact there's so many, and more than any other state, high schools playing football, but so many high-level elite high school football programs in the state. And he understands that's why Chris Gilbert's back, right? Chris Gilbert, he's stocking his staff with guys who have those connections to certain areas in the state of Texas. That's why Chris Gilbert is back. I think as a special assistant, not sure exactly what his title is, but we know it's really about his ties to DFW and to that area, and the respect that he has with high school football coaches there. So you got to get that respect. Mac, that's probably Mac said it on the biggest stage. He knew where his bread was buttered. He gave them props when he was at his zenith, at his apex as a coach. And I think if Sark was a national title, I wouldn't doubt if he learned that lesson too. Because once you're accepted by Texas high school football coaches, once you're in, you're in. And some coaches, they never really got in, right? Charlie never really got in. Right, with the Texas high school football coach. He never really got truly accepted by him. Probably wasn't around long enough for it. But there is something about, being, one of us, if you will. And those Texas high school football coaches, at one point, they'll accept you as one of us. One of us. And that's what you want if you're a Sark. You want to be them to accept you as being one of them. And I think Sark's done a really good job of it. From what I'm hearing, the coaches like him. He gives them time. That's what they want down there, Clay. They want time. They want to pick your brain. They want you to be open. They want you to be honest with them and talk ball. And it seems like Sark and his coaching staff were very, obviously willing to do so.
Yeah, not to bring up the past. I know it was last year when Jimbo Fisher at A&M decided not even to show up. Didn't even come to the coach's school. It was kind of like, okay, that's the end. I mean, whatever the buyout is, they're going to go ahead and buy that out. If you won't even show up. And it was in Houston last year, which is a short little drive down into H-Town. When Jimbo won't even make time to show up for that deal, that's kind of like, oh man, that is it. for you. You're not, you got to go. But just arguably never more important because, now Texas and the SEC further opens the gate to the SEC schools. Everything Rod just said, those coaches know in the Deep South and LSU, at Alabama, Kalen DeBoer now, they want to recruit Texas hard. It was Steve Sarkisian last Wednesday when they were, when he got on stage for his big media availability at the SEC Media Day, said, "Welcome to Dallas, Texas." Welcome in. Sark has, he does. You can only bring, your own guys, but you have to defend the border at some level and make sure that you have the best relationship, and your staff does, with the coaches in this state, because everybody's coming to poach, and that's just the ongoing battle. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. And especially in the state of Texas, when it comes to protecting your home turf. I know Texas is now on even footing with Texas A&M inside the state, but that's not the only team that you're going to have to fight for those elite players, right? Who are we talking about most this cycle? Well, it's Oregon. What has it been in past cycles? Well, Texas has had fights with Alabama. They've had fights with Georgia. They've certainly had fights with Ohio State and LSU, right? Plenty of other teams and programs around the country are fighting for some sort of territory inside the state of Texas. And not only is it important for Sarkisian and his staff, because I did see Tashard Choice, I saw Kenny Baker, I saw AJ Milby. All these guys were out there shaking hands, kind of getting out there, politicking again with some of these high school coaches, just establishing more and more of those relationships that are so important, right? What do these guys do whenever the open contact period opens up? Well, they start inside the Austin region. They expand to Central Texas, Waco, San Antonio, and then they hit every school elsewhere. Dallas, Houston, West Texas, East Texas, they go all over. These relationships matter, especially when Texas, as open as it has been. I don't mean to make the joke here, but it's open borders in the state of recruiting, right? Everywhere. Oregon, Ohio State, LSU, Alabama. All these schools want a chunk of Texas, and they're coming in with success. So to be out there kind of flaunting a little bit with the Texas logo. Of course, Sarkisian was wearing one of those nice orange jackets that he wears so well at the coach's school, but at the same time, very, very opportunistic, if you will, for this staff to get out there and meet as many guys as you can. And you never know who's going to come around with the next 4 or 5-star prospect from nowhere, right? We see it time and time again.
Yeah, that's right. Those relationships pay dividends across the board, short and long term. I saw Kyle Flood did a well-attended offensive line clinic for the coaches. I mean, those are important things. I mean, to learn that, one of the best in the business, and Kyle Flood, spreading the knowledge, sharing his information, because those guys are just like Texas, about to hit camp for their fall season at their high school, whatever level that is. And the more they can learn from some of the best, that's the access that they want. Help us with your schemes and how you're teaching it and how you're coaching it. Those kind of clinic things can be invaluable as you move forward, because it helps them, and then they can help you the other side. It's reciprocal, without a doubt. So that's ongoing through the week. That'll lead into the camp opening in 8 days. And that's as Rod said, because we started, man, thank God there's going to be some players on the field practicing, getting ready for an important season. And it certainly is important, guys, as the Longhorns hit this. I know I saw where the Big Ten is having their media days right now over in Indianapolis. They're getting geared up, and it does feel like there's a consensus top 4 teams in the country. That hasn't changed. I don't think it will change. We just left SEC media days in Dallas, and it was Texas and Georgia. In the Big Ten, it's Ohio State and Oregon. Those 4 schools are seen as the premier schools and ready to go. Both in the same conferences now. 2 in the Big Ten. They're going to play the same weekend. Texas plays Oklahoma. Oregon will host Ohio State, and then a couple of weeks later, Texas will host Georgia. Safe to say, the month of October will not decide a lot, but will be revealing to who are actually the top 3-4 teams in college football.
Yeah, no, I can't wait, because I really want to see how the newcomers to these big power conferences, how they adapt to the new ecosystems, right? It's, for Quinn Ewers going to the SEC, different defensive mentality, line of scrimmage league. It's just and even I think you had this sound, CJ, I believe it was it Jackson Dart who talked about, coming to the SEC, they're going to obviously be a little bit more aggressive, in other conferences. Big 12 talking about they like the drop 8 philosophy. They'll probably play with some of their pressure packages in the Big 12 in terms of simulated pressures, probably throw more exotic looks at you. You got hybrid defenders. You don't have as many hybrid defenders in the SEC. They got their front seven defenders, front seven. You know what I mean? They'll probably go to more old school blitzing as opposed to some of the exotic hybrid concepts you would see in the Big 12. So different ecosystems. So I want to see how the newcomers, even to the Big 10 as well. Big 10 has a conference culture all of its own, right? They want to, used to be kind of grounded, about hardball ball, right? Kind of really embodies the Big Ten culture. But now you're bringing in these high-flying offenses, USC, Oregon, Washington, being infused into the Big Ten. How does the Big Ten adapt? Because the Big Ten, I love the Big Ten. Big Ten is a slow conference. They always have been. They're just a slow conference. They are. All right. Even you can go Texas high school football, Texas high school track, I believe. I always throw it out there that the fastest team for the Texas high school track and field championships, they actually had a faster 4x1 time than the Big Ten champion. I think that is actually true. So there's a different culture of speed in some of the more southern conferences as opposed to the Big Ten. But now you're bringing in some of that West Coast speed. That's going to be interesting. Texas and their, the way they adapt and acclimate to the SEC is going to be really interesting. Even the Big 12. The Big 12 is bringing in, Colorado's coming in, Utah's coming in. You could have a newcomer win the conference in 3 of the Power 4 conferences. First year, Texas could do it. Oregon could do it. Big 12, Utah could do it in their first year. And what would that say about the perception that we've had about these power conferences for so long? Are they a little bit overblown or overrated? Or are we underrated the other conferences? Like, the Pac-12 and, maybe even the Big 12, where Texas, depending on how Oklahoma performs in the SEC, going into the SEC, or, the teams that are going into the Big 10. So that's, I think, a really interesting storyline. Not a lot of people are talking about, but I can't wait to watch how these newcomers, and how their systems and schemes translate to that new ecosystem and how quickly they adapt to it. Big 10 is boring.
True. What's that?
That's what I see something. Ashley says Big 10 boring. Ed Blake says Big 10 is boring. And I call it slow, call it boring, whatever you want to do, but it's a different style. Like they'll grind. Honestly, and that's why that Texas Michigan game is going to be, the contrasting styles are going to make it such a really interesting matchup, because Texas is playing a different style than what Michigan plays and what Michigan is used to. So styles make fights. Okay, let me get my stat right, because I've been referencing it, so I got to get it right. Atascocita ran a 39.14 in the 4x100 meters. Iowa, who won the Big Ten, ran a 39.28.
That's crazy.
In the 4x1. So, like I said, speed different down south, man. Sorry, it is. And that's why when Sark plays Michigan, I'd blitz them with speed all over the damn field. I let them see it. I let them see that speed. I know they got great athletes, but man, on a just kind of grand scale macro, they don't see the kind of speed that Sark covets on his team. And he said this might be his fastest team, fastest wide receiver group. I'd put that to the test.
Well, and that's the great part, because I love the word you use around ecosystem, right? You're moving into a new ecosystem, and I'm gonna have Matt put up a tweet here from Matt Miller, the NFL Draft Scout, that I think goes to what you're saying. But it's a different place you're playing in. Doesn't mean you can't win it. And everything you just said about the SEC, there's more talent. I mean, we watched the draft. There's more guys from the SEC, not just Alabama and Georgia, but all through the conference that get drafted. That the NFL scouts are watching. So you're playing a different level of depth and talent, without a doubt. But Sark's been there. Sark understands how that conference works, right? I mean, I think we all watched Sark kind of have to adapt to what the Big 12 was, right? I mean, even Pete Witkowski came in year one and kind of, had to figure out what that was going to be. That's the challenge that you have. But I'll just read this tweet, because I must have not sent it well to Matthew, our producer. But it was NFL Draft Scout Matt Miller, who works for ESPN.
Yep.
And this is because we're going to get into this East-West Shrine game coming up, because there's a watch list who's going to be watching for the East-West Shrine list. He said, Matt Miller said, you're going to hear a lot about how the 2025 NFL draft class is one of the biggest ever, maybe the biggest ever, off of last year's, where it's very lean at the back end, because all those guys are now going to move on to the NFL after the COVID years and the extra years. He said, here's a good case in point. Arkansas has 19 players on my scouting watch list. That means 19 who have been tabbed as NFL caliber scouts and coaches. Here it is right here. If we go deeper, Arkansas has 26 players who are draft eligible and have to be evaluated by area scouts. And that's just Arkansas. The P5 is closest to my home, so I always get there. So he's saying, I mean, think about their pick to finish, 13th in the conference?
Yep.
12th or 13th in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And they have 19 guys that are already on NFL watch boards, 26 that may get drafted or at least will be evaluated as preferred free agents or draft picks. And that's one of the lesser teams in the conference. I think that, Rod, is what you're talking about, CJ, the ecosystem. Texas is moving into an ecosystem of just huge talent. Even the bad teams are good as far as players. Yep. They've got good dudes that the NFL's keeping an eye on. And that's, I guess, if you maybe eliminate Vanderbilt maybe this year, all the other 15 have NFL caliber players. And that's what Texas has to be prepared for. That's the challenge of the Southeastern Conference, in my opinion.
Yeah, 19 for Arkansas, who's expected to be a bottom feeder this year, right? We talk about Sam Pittman being on the hot seat a little bit. You don't expect the team that's 14th or 15th in your conference to have that level of talent, right? When Texas was still in the Big 12, there were teams middle of the pack, like a Texas Tech, where you'd look at and, you'd see a Miles Price, you'd see a guy off the edge that could really go, a Tyree Wilson, but you wouldn't see it throughout the entire offense or the entire defense. There's certainly going to be a level in which the trenches are going to be elevated for the Texas Longhorns as well. So it's a different world. But, hey, Texas, if there's ever a time to join a new conference, I would argue it's right now, right? You're coming off of the time in which you got very close to the college football national championship. You didn't win it. Sarkisian mentioned it at the coaches' school as well. Hey, we got a little bit of a taste, but we didn't get the whole pie, and that's what we want, right? We got a little slice. We got an understanding of what we like, and winning is what we like. But to go out and prove it week after week and facing teams like Arkansas with all of this talent, it's going to be a little bit more of a grind. So those games that you see in which Texas squanders a 20-point lead or they don't play up to their standard, which we've started to hear more and more is going to be a big saying around Austin, Texas this year. That's going to come back and bite you at some point if you don't take care of business from the get-go. Again, I look no further than week 2 against Michigan. If you can get out to a good start against Michigan, Jerry Hamilton and I spoke about it earlier this week. Not only does that kind of alleviate the stress and the emphasis put on the week-to-weeks later on in the season, especially when you have Georgia and Oklahoma back-to-back, but it gives you that sense of confidence moving forward. And it lets you understand where you are from a talent perspective, because Michigan's going to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams that you play this season, even with the SEC schedule. So that's going to be really important for me. If Texas can come away with the win in that one, I think that it sets up for the rest of the table to look really, really positive in terms of what their ceiling could actually be long-term.
Yep. Good
well,
stuff.
hey, so Rod, we pick up on the Arkansas thing and what CJ said, because Sark talks about being a thermometer, not a, what is the phrase he talks about? Set the temperature, right?
Yeah.
Because
Not a thermostat. He wants to be right. Thermostat, not a thermometer.
Yeah, thermostat, not a thermometer. Don't measure the temperature, deliver the temperature.
Yeah.
And listening to Sam Pittman on the final day of SEC Media Days last Thursday, he owned that he's on the hot seat, and he talked about they had 4 or 5 really close games that they lost last year that puts them in the bottom feeder. But when you see Matt Miller say they've got 26 draft eligible players, they got dudes. I mean, those are that's the challenge that you face, and it's a narrower margin than before, even greater than even though Texas got favorable schedule draw with the bottom of the conference outside of Georgia. Those are still really talented teams. Kentucky's been in a bowl game 8 straight years. Arkansas, the coach is fighting for his life and he wants to be there. That's what's fun about this. Texas has the team, the squad, the roster to do it. We've watched it be built. Same time, you got to go do it, and you're going to be tested like you haven't been before in the Big 12.
Yeah, and this season I was looking at. I like Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio. I know some people think obviously it's a flawed kind of flawed computation, if you will, but I like it because it kind of gives you a really good context as to how talented teams are. And basically the blue chip ratio for him is teams that have over 50% of their roster, at least 50%, blue chip recruits, 4- and 5-star recruits. And in the 3 years Texas has been obviously under Sark, in the last 3 years. Sark is 2-3 against teams that meet the blue chip criteria, have at least 50% of their roster be blue chip recruits. By the way, that's not Washington, because Washington didn't meet it, because Washington 50% of their roster is not blue chip recruits. They just develop really, really well. And I looked at the schedule this year and just wanted to see, all right, how many teams do they play this year that meet the blue chip criteria? And it's 5. So they play 5 in 3 years. They're gonna play 5 in this schedule just this year. Like Florida is on that list. It's Michigan, it's A&M, it's Oklahoma, Georgia, of course, and it's Florida. And basically, if you go by the blue chip ratio, Florida will be the most talented. Basically, if Florida was in the Big 12, they had been the most talented team Texas would have played in Big 12 play behind Oklahoma last season. Like, yeah. People are laughing at Florida, saying, "Oh, they're gonna have an interim coach. They're gonna be at the bottom of the SEC," and yet Florida is gonna be loaded with a ton of talent, more talent than any of the Big 12 teams you would have played, other than Oklahoma. That's the difference. You're gonna be seeing that kind. Like you just said, Arkansas. Who would have thought Arkansas has that much NFL caliber talent on it? Unless Matt Miller, who's a draft analyst, was gonna break that down for you. And they're not even in the blue chip ratio. That's just talent. All right, so that is the difference, man. You have, I think it's a better quality overall, and you have that week after week, as opposed to the Big 12. You have that 2-3 times a season, maybe. You're gonna have that in the SEC 4 times in conference play, and then Michigan is another one. Well, you'll be playing light talent. By the way, Texas 2-3 against teams who meet the blue chip criteria. That's a team with light talent as Texas. So in the SEC, you're going to see a lot of that. A lot of teams with light talent as you. Yeah. And you're going to have to be able to adapt. Injuries are going to happen. You got to need talented depth and just the wear and tear overall this season. So I can't wait to see how Texas responds. As CJ said, this is the ideal Texas team for this transition. Deepest team, Sarkis said, since he's been there. Fastest team. Biggest in terms of the big humans. Biggest team in terms of the offensive line, in terms of them adapting to a line of scrimmage league. I guess you'd like to have Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy going into the league, maybe. That's probably the only thing. Other than that, hey, man, I think Texas is in a really good spot.
Yeah. I think it's between the ears, y'all. I mean, I think Texas has to adjust to the idea that every week you got to bring it. Don't worry about records. Don't worry about because you're playing a talented team every single week once you begin conference play. And Texas does have the benefit of like a Mississippi State with a first-year head coach and a Vanderbilt. Those are some teams you probably can roll out and beat. The rest of them, you better be ready to play because you said at Florida, we just showed the Arkansas stat, A&M. Those are really talented football teams that are coming to beat you.
Yeah, I saw, and I brought this on the early live streams, Peter Burns, and you know Peter Burns and respect his work.
I saw him in last week. Great guy.
Yes, he does great work, and he likes Texas, by the way, so he's not a Texas hater. I preface his comments because he's the one that said Texas reminds him of Georgia in 21, 22, and 23. He said that's what Texas reminds him of when he saw him at the spring game. So he likes Texas. But he recently said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said Texas will have the biggest bullseye on their program of any team in college football over the last 2 decades. Transitioning into the SEC with all the, obviously the way Texas does, with all the swagger that Texas does it, but with all the, the hoopla and the hype during the offseason. And he said they'll have the biggest bullseye of any team in college football over the last 2 decades. A lot of teams with some bullseye on their backs in the last 2 decades. But I'll admit, they're definitely going to be in that conversation. So to your point, everybody going to be motivated to play Texas. And by the way, that's always been the case. What do we hear from Mac Brown? What do we hear from Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, and Sark? We get everybody's best. Texas, there's something about this, all right, that brings out everybody's best. They go, it's their Super Bowl. It ain't gonna be any different, except now it's better talent, better brand of football, better everything. Maybe not better coaching. I think the Big 12 has some pretty damn good coaching, actually. I don't know if it's better coaching, but everything else is an upgrade.
Well, that's awesome. Peter's great. And I agree. I mean, Quinn Ewers got beat up for saying it, but at the same time, he defended it this past week where he said, no, I mean, we're Texas. And it's kind of like rookie hazing, right? You're a rookie. We saw Caitlin Clark deal with it in the WNBA. They're going to try to make you prove yourself. Yep. Texas is a rookie in this conference, y'all. I mean, they're a rookie in that league, and that league is proud. That's why I said last week when we were talking from Dallas, it's arrogance meets arrogance, right? I mean, Texas is an arrogant program, whether it's right or wrong. They just are. Because it's a huge brand and a proud brand. Well, so is the SEC, and whether they're good or not, they still believe it. and they all expect to win. They all expect to be good. As I mentioned, Shane Beamer at South Carolina is talking about 12-team playoff. I mean, they're serious, man. They're an arrogant conference, and they believe they're the best. I think numbers would back it up as far as NFL draft picks and recruiting rankings and national championships. And Texas joins that. That's going to make it. Sark has instilled that. He's been building to this. He talks about respect for every team. It's really just got to show up on the football field, because we saw at times last year, even still in the Big 12, in the F the Haters tour, there was still some moments of lapse. There were still some times of, mental, weakness where it was allowed a 20-point lead to slip. And that can't happen this year, because it can derail what can be a great season. Speaking of the Michigan game that started this, CJ, you're talking about Michigan with Jerry and Rod. I did talk to Jim Nagy, and we're going to get into this East-West Shrine Bowl list that I want to get your thoughts on. But Jim Nagy was one of my favorite guests from SEC Media Days. He sat with me for about 20, 25 minutes. He's the director of the Senior Bowl, which comes after the East-West Shrine Bowl. And what I didn't know, but I learned as we talked and then talked afterwards, he's a Michigan grad. He grew up in the state of Michigan. His dad was a high school coach in Michigan his whole life. He was 20 years a scout in the NFL. And we got to talking after the interview about just the game on September 7th. And he said, Texas should win that game. I mean, he was really honest about it. He's like, Texas has every opportunity to win that game, because he said, I've seen the quarterbacks. They're going to pick one, but he's not going to be great. He's going to have to come along, kind of like J.J. McCarthy at the very beginning when they started with that with Jim Harbaugh. But, man, they replaced everybody on offense. I mean, outside of Colston Loveland, the tight end, and Edwards, the running back, who was a backup to Blake Corum, everybody else is brand new in offense. And, he said the defense will be stiff. Sark's got to have a good game plan and bring, let Quinn, get some confidence. But he said the only way I see Texas losing that game is if they turn the ball over. Like if Quinn has a really bad game and Wink Martindale can force Quinn into a bad game or fumbles and turnovers. But he said Michigan's going to have a hard time generating long drives in offense, because just a lot of, that's just Jim Nagy's opinion, but he's a Michigan grad who knows that program well. Felt like Texas is a real good opportunity to go in there and get a win if they play a clean game, if they, go in there and handle business. And Rod, we saw it last year with Sark at Alabama, with all summer to prepare for it, to build the game plan, to rep the game plan. That makes you feel pretty good if you're a Longhorn fan. And as CJ said, if you get that win, now you set yourself up for the big national narrative that you want early in September.
Yeah, I feel good about Texas in that game. Like I said, matchups make fights. I think that's a good matchup for Texas because I think Michigan's want to slow the game down. They're going to want to play ball control, kind of milk time off the clock. And that's what you want to do against Sark anyway. You want to limit possessions. Quinn Ewers is not a turnover-prone quarterback. We've seen him turn the ball over, of course, but he's never been a turnover-prone quarterback. It's not really in his DNA. So I'm not worried about him having some kind. And even when he does turn the ball over, usually we see him recover pretty well. I mean, think about the Oklahoma game where it starts out. When he has a bad, series or a quarter, we see him bounce back pretty well. He's pretty resilient. So I'm not worried about that. And I think Sark's going to have a killer game plan, by the way, offensively. He's looking forward to going up against Wink Martindale. Only thing that concerns me a little bit is Quinn's ability to handle pressure. One of the things we talked about, right? Quinn, he hasn't, I think he has a tendency to look at pressure, to see it instead of feeling the pressure like Michael Penix does and some other great quarterbacks. And I think he needs to be feeling the pressure more. His pressure to sack numbers, 30.4 for the season last season. If you look at pressure to sack numbers for 2022, he was at 13.9%. If you look at allowed pressure, 2022, 14%, allowed pressure in 2023 jumps up to 22%. The question is, how does he handle pressure? Because he did better in 2022 than he did in 2023. Wink Martindale is going to bring a lot of pressure, more than anybody else that Sark and that Quinn Ewers will see on the schedule in 2024. He's notorious for it. And by the way, Michigan's got the pieces to do it. It's going to take 2 to 3 of it's going to take basically a double team to block those interior D linemen they got, or your interior offensive line's got to have the best game they've had all season long. Essentially, imagine T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy now playing for Michigan. That's basically what Michigan has. And they got the best corner in college football. So it's a great test. All the scouts want to see Quinn in that Michigan game, because there's a really good chance that in that Michigan game, they're going to be able to stop the run, or at least neutralize the run for Texas. because Texas, they got the best D tackle duo in the country. So it's going to be a Quinn game. I think Sark's going to come out and throw it. I think it's going to be early down passing rate, and he's going to blitz them with speed early on, and he's going to throw to open up the run. Because, and I know it sounds crazy because they got the best cornerback in college football, but they ain't got Will Johnson in every place in that secondary. So there is a matchup to exploit, and Sark's going to engineer it. He's going to find it. And you find it by throwing the football out of exotic formations, stressing that Michigan defense. Why the hell would you want to run up against the best D-tackle duo in college football? How'd that work out against Texas opponents last year? Not good. And it ain't going to work out very good this time either. I'm going to tell you that right now. They're just – nobody has D-tackle duos like that. So I think, why bang your head against that brick wall? Come out throwing the football, force Michigan to adjust. They take guys out of that box, and then I think you can run the football a little more effectively. And I'd run it off the edges. I'd force those D tackles. What did Oklahoma do to the Texas D tackles? Made them go east and west, make them run around, go tempo on them, wear them out, wear the big man out, and then start running on them. That's kind of what I do.
That's great. I think you're right about that. And that echoes what Jim Nagy said to me, CJ, that, if you get a lead, we saw Texas beat Alabama. And the next week, Jalen Milroe was benched, and they almost lost the game. I mean, he thinks Michigan could be in that same spot September 7th, where they're still trying to pick the right quarterback for what they want to do. It's possibly the kid Alex Orji from the Metroplex. But at the same time, there's a couple other guys there where, Texas played an Alabama team week 2 and in Tuscaloosa last year that wasn't completely settled with a new offense and a new quarterback. Texas took advantage of it, won by 10. That's kind of the mindset here. And to Rod's point, come out and blitz them with speed and your continuity, your weapons, and make them chase you, even on their home field.
Yeah, I think that absolutely has to be the case, right? You got to get out quick to this Michigan team. You let them shorten the game, let them linger around. The longer and longer you allow Michigan at home to play the game that they want to play, right? We talk about whether it's Alex Orji or another quarterback. There's not a lot of continuity there. They had 22 receiving touchdowns a year ago. 15 of them walked out of the door after the season, right? So it was Roman Wilson with 12, Colston Loveland had 4. So that's 16. 4 of them, Colston Loveland obviously returning, but those were your 2 big receiving weapons. 12 of your 22 came from one player. He went in the second round. There's not a lot of weapons with experience. And similarly to what Texas faced after 2023, they looked around their room and said, well, who's going to be the guy? Mm-hmm. Texas went out and added 3 guys from the portal. Michigan didn't. So when you look at what's the similarities there, Texas was proactive in finding new weapons for Quinn Ewers and their quarterback to surround their quarterback with that seamless transition of elite talent in the passing game. I don't think Michigan, 1, has a great passing quarterback option on roster, and 2, I think that Tyler Morris is a really good option. But I don't think that they have 2, 3, or 4 other guys at that wide receiving room outside of the tight end, Colston Loveland, obviously, that can keep up if the game opens up and becomes what we saw in the second half against Alabama a year ago, right? We saw Texas and Alabama kind of go, blow for blow early on in that first half, right? Texas got into the red zone. They settled for 3 a few times. Alabama had a good run towards the end of the first half. But more than anything else, right, you didn't see those, Texas or Alabama dig too deep into their bag. It felt like either one was kind of coaching pretty cautious early on with their play style and their play aggressiveness. And I say that because when second half opened up, what did Sarkisian do? Oh, it was the boomerang routes. It was the deep crossers to the tight end. Oh, let's get the running game involved a little bit more. And then once we're up 10 points, let's just run the ball out. And let's let our offensive line do what they need to do and develop or how they've developed over the last few years. We're in a position for them to finally run out 7 minutes on a clock. They probably wouldn't have been able to do that over the last 15 years against an Alabama team on the road, no less. For that to have happened last year gives you an idea of how good that offensive line is. Add a whole nother year of experience and development going into Michigan. I know that they're going to be tested with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, but hey, you're expecting that offensive line to be in the conversation for the Joe Moore, are you not? So I understand that that's going to be a big part of it. They're going to be able to, take the training that they've had a whole year ago with Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat into Ann Arbor and kind of figure out what works best on the ground as well. But if that game starts out in Texas's favor early on, if Quinn comes out looking like 2022 Quinn against Alabama in that first quarter where he's, 9 of 10 for 180 yards and 2 scores, I don't think that there's a chance Michigan's in this ball game by halftime. And I say that as someone who certainly respects the talent that they've got, but I understand too that they're not suited to throw the ball down the field at all.
There's UT Boy with the super chat. I understand the need for talking points, addressing concerns, opinion. I'm going to keep it. Michigan's going to get taken out behind the woodshed. There you go.
There we go, UT Boy.
Hey, I hope so. I think it's possible that Texas could just go in there and boat race them. That defense, though, is nasty, guys. It is a legit. It's a top 10 defense. So it'll be. I don't think it'll be that much of a test for the offense. I think for the defense. So I think their offense, they're going to be figuring. They kind of got some identity issues offensively because of what they lost. Entire offensive line, quarterback, they lost a lot. But I think Sark will have a hell of a game plan, and you know this too, CJ, because you've done the research on the opening drives for Sark. That opening script, I know 40 plays. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. I guarantee you. Kind of like we've seen against Alabama in those big showcase games. But more importantly, Sark likes to open up with the pass. What did you say, CJ? What's his opening pass? What's his pass rate on his opening drive? Right? 75, 76%?
74, 76%, right in there.
Yeah, exactly. So he's going to open up with the pass. He wants to open up with the pass, but he wants to close with the run. His ideal game is that Bama game, where you kind of open things up with the pass, and then you close with the run. And that's what he wants to do. I think that's what he's going to want to do it against Michigan, especially on the road. You want to choke an opponent out with the run game.
Yeah. Well, and UT Boy, we appreciate the super chat here on the On Texas Football live stream. And I'll just say there's a little bit of Texas arrogance there because remember, that team just won the national title, that program. They got all off season too to prepare for Texas. It's not going to be a rollover, I promise you. It'll be a hell of a game. We can't wait for it September 7th. But the Longhorns do, as Rod said, styles make fights. It kind of fits where the Longhorns want to be with all their continuity and their third-year quarterback, and Michigan trying to figure it out on that side of the ball. But Michigan will be a willing foe for 4 quarters, I believe, in that game, and it should be a lot of fun, no doubt about it. All right, so guys, to the conversation of the East-West Shrine game, I over the weekend, after being in Dallas, I kind of got caught back up on the HBO Hard Knocks off season. It's my favorite one. I mean, it's my favorite one. I mean, the preseason one with the training camp, which has been on for 20 years, is good. I really haven't watched much of the in-season Hard Knocks deal because it's there's too much going on. It's just hard to find time to watch that. But man, this off-season one is great. I really love the behind-the-scenes game plan, roster building, you get behind the curtain in a big way. And really, first episode of the Hard Knocks Behind the Giants, it starts at the East-West Shrine Bowl, right? They lose their game, and then they're at the East-West Shrine Bowl up there in Frisco. And it's funny if you've only seen a couple episodes, the beginnings of the Brian Burns trade to the Giants from the Panthers began in the East-West Shrine game. When Dan Morgan, the GM, met with Joe Shane, the GM of the Giants, they started talking, and next thing you know, you get to later. I don't want to spoil anything, but that's what led to the trade. Those are important, right? The East-West Shrine game becomes an important time where everybody gets together. They start watching the talent, start building their board. And, East-West Shrine game is the All-Star game ahead of the Senior Bowl, which I've talked about tonight. That is got a list of Longhorn players that they're watching. Can we post that up there, Matt, about the Shrine game and what they're looking at, Longhorns that they're paying attention to? There you go. Look at that. And that echoes what Jim Nagy told me from the Senior Bowl that, hey, man, we got 10, 12, 15 guys we're looking at from the Longhorns that we'd love to bring to Mobile. But look at that. Those are East-West Shrine watch list players on this Texas Longhorn team. Pretty deep.
It is. And, I know we talked about Arkansas with Matt Miller having 19. Texas has 15 on this list, but there are some notable omissions, right? I don't see Isaiah Bond. I don't see Kelvin Banks. There's a few guys that I think could certainly play their way into larger conversations, right? What's on the interior defensive line? I see Alfred Collins. I see Vernon Broughton. I don't see, I guess, Jermaine Lollet is up there as well. But Bill Norton, Tia Savea, 2 older guys that could certainly depart as well. I think there's a number of ways that you could spin this Texas roster into having 20 caliber guys who could play in the NFL. Not saying this right away this year, but from this team that's expected to be juniors or seniors, I think that list goes up to 20 or 22 with the way that Texas has recruited right now. It's been pretty impressive.
It has. Well, and I would say to the Arkansas thing with Matt Miller, let's remember that takes in all classes, young guys who aren't draft eligible yet, all the way to the top. I think there's a draft eligible conversation there, But whether I don't know the East-West Shrine rules. I know Jim Nagy told me that they're excited at the Senior Bowl now. Last couple of years, they can take underclassmen. So they could bring Kelvin Banks to Mobile. They could bring Quinn Ewers, or at least invite them to Mobile. They can now, it's a Senior Bowl, but they have changed and adjusted the rules because the NFL wants to see the guys that are going to be in the draft. They want to get close to them before they get to the combine. So I think that's a great point, CJ, that, it's a big number. I mean, Andrew Makuba is a guy that came to Austin from Clemson to, improve his draft stock. You mentioned Isaiah Bond. He came to Austin to get on draft boards. Gavin Holmes, who's now in his second year from Wake Forest. Jermaine Lole, who transferred from Louisville. These are guys that want to be in that conversation. And then there's guys that have been on campus for a while. The Vernon Broughton, who is a 5-star player or a 4-star player when he came in. Alfred Collins, Trey Moore, underappreciated kid out of UTSA. Rod, this. They come to Texas to get noticed. They come to Texas to get a spotlight on them so that these opportunities come for them to give themselves a Sunday opportunity to play professional football.
Yeah, it's just it's really compelling because, just a few years ago, you had players saying literally that they that they didn't go to Texas because they saw too many great players prior to their recruitment go to Texas and disappear, and Texas didn't develop talent, and there were all these really, I think, they were true ways to negatively recruit against Texas. And now you have guys coming to Texas like Isaiah Bond saying it's a business decision. I'm coming here because it's going to help my draft stock. And that's just, it's just something that you got to give Sark and his staff a lot of credit for, that they've been able to flip that narrative very quickly in a matter of 3 years. And now, they are getting a reputation for developing talent, which may have been the biggest issue in the last decade and a half at Texas. There was plenty of talent on campus. It wasn't being developed. It wasn't being maximized. And now it is. And now you have guys coming to Texas because, like you said, they want to showcase their talent on the biggest stage, compete for championships, and play with other great players. 4 or 5 years ago, it was literally, the negative recruiting points against Texas. They can't develop talent. They don't play for championships. They're overrated. They underachieve. It's really a credit to Sark and the staff how quickly things, and to the players, how quickly things have flipped.
Well, and to come back to the Michigan conversation, CJ, look at on that list. You got Hayden Connor and Jake Majors. That matchup with Michigan week 2. I mean, you don't think every NFL scout's going to be watching that when you're talking about the best defensive tackle duo? Yeah. You don't think Kyle Flood's instilling that in those guys? And, hey, man, that's where you make your bones right there. I mean, you play Georgia later, Oklahoma, but you're going up against the best. You're going up against Sweat and Murphy, essentially, from last year. You know it well. Go shine there. Hold your own. You put yourself on an NFL draft board.
Yeah, 100%. And you're going to see a lot more of that in the SEC, right? So not only are you getting a taste of what it's like against the best, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, but the rest of your schedule, right? You're going to face Georgia. We talked about how impressive that roster is looking. Kentucky's going to be the same. Deion Walker, Rod, we've brought him up a few times as well in the past week. Just, Aaron, I don't know if you got a chance to see him just walking around. Deion Walker, the interior defensive lineman from Kentucky.
Yeah.
There might not have been a more impressively built athlete in the entire week of SEC Media Days. That kid looked incredible, built out of a lab. For the folks at home playing the video game right now, that's looking like what he was, right? About 6'3", I think he was at 320. He said he slimmed down about 15 pounds and he's moving better than he ever has. That should be scary for interior offensive linemen. But to the point, Jake Majors, Hayden Connor, also DJ Campbell, who will be draft eligible this year as well. He will be a junior. He will be also in the conversation to depart as a former 5-star offensive lineman recruit out of the Arlington area. So I know that if the opportunity does arrive for DJ Campbell to depart for the league, I think that there's a good chance that he will. So for all 3 of those guys, big opportunities to go out and showcase their talents against those 2 Michigan guys, and then set some good standards for what's to come with future tape in the SEC whenever the rest of the schedule comes rolling around.
Hey, guys, talk to me about Trey Moore because he's on that list. I think he'll be a Senior Bowl invitee as well, potentially as a junior because he's only 2 years at UTSA. But it's funny, in Dallas, I talked to Fozzie Whitaker for a little while. I know, Rod, you work with Fozzie on the 3rd and Longhorn, and you know Fozzie well. He was we were talking with him about the spring game, and he said, "Man, the guy you didn't see in that spring game was Trey Moore because they really kind of like a preseason NFL game. They just didn't even put him on the field. They didn't want him to get hurt. They know what they've gotten him. But Fozzie was saying going to practices that guy was unblockable, even by the really good Texas offensive line, that guy has got a nasty streak to him, plays with a chip on his shoulder because he was under-recruited, had to go to UTSA to prove himself, and now he sees that spotlight opportunity. Really keep hearing good things about Trey Moore, because we hear a lot about Colin Simmons and Ethan Burke and Colton Bosick, but don't forget about Trey Moore and what he's bringing to this pass rush potentially. As Fozzie told me, almost unblockable when he would see the practices on campus there.
Yeah, and I know a lot of folks have in the chat have talked about his appearance, that behind the face mask with Alex Okafor. I haven't got a chance to hear it. I'm gonna go check it out probably when it's done. And I heard, but the things that people are saying about him, his maturity, how he really conducts himself and presents himself, and it really echoed the same sentiment that Sark had about how he presented himself and brought this very professional demeanor and this maturity with him. And I think ultimately, and I've even said it this, I don't know who starts at defensive end for Texas. I assume it's going to be Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke, but with everything I hear about this young man and what the impact that he's had, and really him as a leader overall on the team and really on the field, how he makes so many great splash plays. I wonder if he will usurp one of the players on the edge, or if they have such a healthy rotation at the edge now because they have so much talent there, more talent than they've had in a long time on the edge, that they'll start one group like Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell, and then maybe have a group that finishes the game, depending on how the game goes. That, hey, Texas is supposed to be up in games. Say Sark is up a score or two, and then your opponent, which happened last year a few times, is put in a predictable passing situation. They abandon the run and become a one-dimensional team because they're down double digits or they're down 3 scores or whatever it is. And last year you couldn't get home because you didn't have an effective pass rush that could make the splash plays, even when your opponent was one-dimensional. And that was because your pressure was coming up the interior. And, even though that still is pressure, it wasn't effective in translating to splash plays and negative plays. I think the hope is that this year you get guys like Trey Moore on that edge in the same situation where you're up 2 scores or you're up double digits and that team has abandoned the run game. They're just throwing it and they're one-dimensional, that you'll be able to get home because now you have a natural pass rusher. Last year, I don't know how many natural I like Ethan Burke's pass rush ability. I think Barron Sorrell is a damn good player. I don't know if he's an elite natural pass rusher. I think pass rushing is one of those innate abilities. I think you have it early on. It's programmed early on. There's just some things that translate to it. That's why last year when Sark was asked who the best pass rushers, he said Anthony Hill was one of his best pass rushers, right? Because it's natural. Freshmen coming in can be one of your best pass rushers, which is why Colin Simmons could potentially be one of your better pass rushers, even though he's a freshman. Because in that specific situation, I do think it translates to the next level. If you just maybe to come screaming off the edge, being able to have bend off the edge, the BGO, the ball get off, and he's got all that. So he's your best natural pass rusher. I mean, there's a chance that if Trey Moore plays enough snaps in the right situation, he can get double-digit sacks. And that don't happen a lot. We were talking about that the other day, CJ. It doesn't happen a lot. He's got that kind of ability. Last time Texas had a player with double-digit sacks, got to go back to 2013. Cedric Reed, Jackson Jeffcoat, Charles Amena, who almost did in 2018, had 9.5. Okafor, shout out to Big Oak. He had 12.5 in 2012. Just don't happen a lot. Trey Moore's got that kind of natural pass rushing ability. You can be a damn good player off the edge. Doesn't mean you can be an NFL player off the edge, but doesn't mean you're a natural passer. Jackson Jeffcoat, it wasn't an NFL player for long, but he's one of the best natural pass rushers in the history of Texas football because it's a natural thing. It's like coverage. You can't teach it. You got to recruit it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, well, and you combine that, CJ, with one of the things I noted from the SEC, all first, second, and third teams. Longhorns had 8 second-team players, only 2 on the first team with Kelvin Banks and Bert Auburn, but 8 on the second team and 3 in the defensive backfield. Yeah, with Manny Muhammad and Andrew Makuba and Jade Barron. That's the SEC's 1,200 media members voting. If they think that secondary can be what we think improved, that allows the pass rush to get home even further with a guy like Trey Moore, all kind of backing up what we just talked about. Hey, let me mention here, because we appreciate, we're probably too far in to have not mentioned our great friend Mark Sanders, the Texas alum, Mark Saunders, I should say, when it comes to protecting all your stuff, right? Insurance is why we get it, because you have cool stuff and you want to make sure it's in good hands. And that's what Mark Saunders is all about. He's a Texas alum, 35 years of experience. So if you're sitting there thinking, man, I'm not sure if all my stuff is covered, if I'm in a good place, call the Texas Allstate agent, Mark Saunders. He's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car, boat, motorcycle, RV, ATV, all your vehicles. If you're looking for someone local, they're in the Round Rock, Austin area, give the Texas Allstate agent, Mark Saunders, and his office a call tomorrow, 512-218-8571. That's 512-218-8571. And again, ask yourself as you put your head on the pillow tonight, are you in good hands with all your stuff? Obviously, there have been a lot of natural disasters of late with floods, tornadoes, all the storms we've dealt with. You want to make sure you're good to go. With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with the Texas alum Mark Saunders. 512-218-8571. You're in good hands with Mark and his team. We appreciate him very, very much. He is our partner here on the live stream every Tuesday night here on the On Texas Football Channel, growing like crazy and counting down the days to the college football season. Matthew, if there are super chats, let's fire them up and get into the questions from the folks out there as we are, again, counting down 8 days now to the Longhorns hit the practice field. Sark and his staff will be coming off the coaches' school in San Antonio. And CJ Rod, we're almost there. We're almost to the end of the talking season, right? ACC and Big Ten Media Days will wrap up this week. Next week, well, it'll be about recruiting and obviously the beginning of practice. But with that in mind, CJ, give me your thoughts on the recruiting. Now, let's fill folks in on what's coming. I know you and Jerry and the staff will keep everybody posted, but a big, Thursday coming up? Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, Thursday's going to be a big event down in Austin. Of course, the dead period will conclude 11:59 p.m. Wednesday night. So recruits will be back out, getting to see some schools over the weekend. I know Oklahoma and Texas A&M have some big events this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Texas obviously has theirs on Thursday. So getting the first crack at allowing some of these kids to get back in front of college coaches, to see the facilities, to see the stadiums as well. A couple big names coming in. Of course, we're expecting Michael Terry and Jonah Williams to both make it in to Austin. That's going to be very important for the Longhorns, 2 5-star prospects, both athletes, by the way. So I'm sure that pitch will be from Texas, involving a lot of different coaches on the staff, coordinators, obviously Steve Sarkisian as well. Will be really interesting to see what's the big pitch for both of those guys individually coming out of that weekend as well. Also worth mentioning, J.J. Hahn out of Santa Margarita, California, will be making his first trip to Austin as well. He was a late bloomer in the 2025 cycle. I say late as we're only entering August in about a week. This guy, he earned a very, very impressive string of offers from Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, all in the span of about 2 weeks. So 6'4", 6'5", 285 pounds. I see him as an interior defensive lineman. This is a guy, you watch the tape and you see the untapped athleticism, right? Very raw in his movements. Hasn't been playing football all too long. From Germany originally. I look at him and say, that's a little bit of what Alfred Collins had in him at high school, at Cedar Creek and Bastrop. Listen, I know Alfred had a 5-star rating by his name, but the athleticism was there. The raw kind of intangibles are there with J.J. Hahn. So I'll be interested to see what he can do his senior season. Of course, Texas expected to have him in Thursday. He's going to officially visit Georgia at some point this fall. Texas working to get a official visit set up for the fall as well. So we'll see exactly what the end-all be-all is with him moving forward. But this is a guy that I think has a very high ceiling in terms of what he could develop into on the interior defensive line.
Interesting. And Jonah Williams out of Galveston area, is baseball included there, CJ?
Yeah, baseball will be a big factor for Jonah Williams. Of course, this is a guy I've heard mentioned inside the top 5 rounds of the 2025 MLB draft. And we understand how difficult that is. And Texas has been hit in that regard a number of times over the years in high school, many times, not so much, including football prospects as well. But you're certainly going to see that become a conversation with Jonah Williams, Jim Schlossnagle, Steve Sarkisian, and what's to come later on. I actually look at Jonah Williams and say there's going to be 2 real decisions for him. The first is going to be, where does he go to play college athletics? And then the next question is, does he play college athletics, right?
Right.
That college commitment could come earlier than expected too. I'm looking at mid-August right now for when some sort of decision could be made for him in which a verbal commitment would be given. But again, that decision to sign in the early period, I'm looking at saying maybe not. I think that might lag on a little bit into the spring, but also the ultimate decision is, will he sign with an MLB team out of the draft, or will he go on to a college campus and play both sports at the next level?
I think he'll go to college and play both sports. I do. I think he'll go.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We haven't seen that in a while. We haven't seen that in a while.
You can probably dig into both NIL groupings, right?
Exactly. That's why. Exactly. That's why I think it's not what it used to be. I say if he was a first round pick, then different. I mean, first round, I get it. But if he's just gonna be in the top 5 rounds, I could definitely see some guys. Hell, you're seeing baseball players, period, who have decided, no, I'll take the college experience and development there at NIL over, obviously, the minor league system and what that obviously what that entails. So I honestly do. And we saw Kyler Murray, right? A few years ago, he made that ultimate decision. This guy was drafted top 10 in both sports and decided, I want to play football. I just think he'll give himself the option to play both. That's how I feel. I hope that's at Texas, by the way.
Yeah. I want to address this real quick, Derek. Wouldn't be holding off be better for his draft status? Yes and no. I say no more so because you see those big elite high school pitchers, outfielders, shortstops, whatever, they all commit to a college at some point, right? That's their fallback, if you will. The real conversation comes with the agents, with the draft area scouts, with the family. Do you think that player will sign? All draft status is out of high school is, do these professional teams and scouts believe that they can spend a second, third, fourth, or fifth round pick on a high school kid who will sign? Otherwise, they're going to the college route because they know that those kids don't really have an option at that level. So that's really where the leverage comes in for the high schoolers and where the hesitancy comes from the MLB side as well.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the last football, baseball star at Texas that doubled up. Peter Gardere back in the day. Peter was a really good baseball player. James Street, of course. I mean, that goes way, way back. He was both.
We've had players, but they didn't do both at the same time, right? Like Quan and Ricky were players. They didn't play Texas baseball.
Yeah. Ricky played minor league ball during the summer. Quan actually, chose baseball and played 3-4 years of minor league ball before coming back, and he was a 22-year-old freshman at Texas on that team. Mr. Maturity over there. That's why he understands the game better than everybody else.
I actually don't think I knew that. I don't think I knew that.
Quan?
Yeah.
Quan Quasby can tell you some stories. He was on a fast track with the LA Angels, but wanted to come back and play college football. And Mac Brown convinced him. And it's been a good choice by him. But you get Quan talking. He felt like he could have had a chance to go to the major leagues, play center field. But
I believe it. Actually,
I believe it too. And he wasn't sure, so and the bus leagues can get old in the West Coast.
Exactly.
PCL, those bus leagues. I'll go play at Texas, and it worked out for both sides. Worked out well. But we'll watch that. Jonah Williams, the name to watch. One more question. Is there another one, Matthew, before we wrap things up here? Isn't being in the SEC and Texas getting better talent the equalizer and the trade-off for playing more talented teams? Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think you guys are on point with what we're saying. Like the Longhorns, they have the roster to go compete, but it's just the understanding that the level of talent within the SEC is greater than they've been playing. So the the week to week, drive to drive, quarter to quarter performance level can't dip. I mean, you can't take quarters off in the SEC, I think is the way to put it, or you're going to leave your chin open to get knocked out.
Yep, totally agree. That's why last year, one score games. I think Sark last year in Texas, they were 3-2 in one score games. And, those were against some teams where you were up, double digits and 3 scores against, probably shouldn't have come down to one score games like a U of H or TCU and some of those games. But if that's the case in the SEC, I do want to see Texas continue to win more than their fair share of those one score games, because last year they were 3-2. Before that, Sark was 2-5 in 2022 in one score games. So that's going to be big, right? So this is because we're still watching Sark evolve as a coach too. I want to see Sark become, a better chess master. He is. He's improving as a coach. There's no doubt. We've seen tremendous growth from Sark since he's been here, but you got to see even more to take Texas to a championship level. So one score games, he's got to be even better against some great. I mean, Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer's a damn good coach, right? Sark has faced him twice and 0-2 against Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer, I saw a stat from the other day against top 25 teams. His record, 85% win percentage. Kirby Smart said 73%. Sark said like 28% win percentage against top 25 teams. Growth. I'm not bringing that stat up for people to get depressed about. No, that's what we need to see growth this year. When you face top 25 teams, Texas have a winning record versus those top 25 teams when they face them this year. Probably going to see 3 to 4 of those teams in the SEC this year. Need to have a winning record versus those teams. One-score games need to be even better in those one-score games. So they're just a little, and I think that will be tested in the SEC. So, yeah, talent-wise, Texas is not concerned about being able to measure up talent-wise. The only schools that had more selections in the all SEC preseason teams were Georgia and Alabama. That's it. Texas got plenty of talent. Matter of fact, guys, they always have had enough talent. Talent has never been the issue. The Cowboys and the Longhorns have the same issues, and it ain't talent. It's always been development of talent, maximizing talent, and coaching and strategy and scheme. And by the way, now the Longhorns have those things. That's why they're competing at a championship level. Cowboys are missing some of those. That's a different discussion for a different day. But talent has never been the issue for Texas, and it's not the issue now. If they come up short, talent will not be the reason why.
Right, and I think that's been said and well agreed to. That since moving the announcement to move to the SEC, Sark and his staff have built a roster that they understand how to win in that conference, what it takes to compete in that conference at a high level, and they have it ready to go. But just pointing out to our audience tonight on a Tuesday night, we will do so all the way to kickoff. That it's a different level of competition. Doesn't mean you can't beat them, because that's what makes it fun. Guys, great stuff. And appreciate Matt. Appreciate CJ, Rod. You guys have a great week. And I know tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, will be coffee and football with the very latest. We count it down, the days, 8 days until the practices begin. The real conversation, the recruiting weekend should be huge. And all you got to do is lock it into YouTube right here on the On Texas Football channel, on TexasFootball.com. And, of course, the website, the Twitters, and all the things you need. It's all there for you. And remember, Mark Saunders and the team at Allstate, appreciate them very much tonight. Guys, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for checking in. Hook 'em.
Have a great night. Thank